Hi, everyone. Thanks, Heather, and welcome to this Cell and Gene Live. As Heather said, I'm Erin Harris, and I'm very grateful that you've joined us for today's important discussion on distributed manufacturing. We're going to be tackling a pretty critical question for cell and gene therapy leaders. We're going to be talking all about how to make the right manufacturing decisions when strategy, speed to clinic, and partner fit are still major concerns. We're joined by two wonderful and major experts. Emily Moran, she is the founder of 3LB Consulting LLC, and Sugu Patro, Ph.D. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Process Development at Kite Pharma, a Gilead Company. I am grateful for them for being here and for their time today as well. We will get started in just a moment, but before we do, I wanted to invite and emphasize to you, our audience, to submit your questions for our panelists throughout our discussion. We often find that the best questions come from you, our audience, and so please do submit them via the Q&A tool, and we will get to as many of them as we can today. So with all that, let's get started. I like to open up all of our Cell and Gene Live events with, open context market framing discussion. And so I want to start with the big picture. We're in a really different manufacturing environment right now, and overcapacity is changing how cell and gene therapy companies, cell and gene therapy startups think about access, control, and timing. And so that means everything we knew about build versus buy versus partnering, even in just as little as 5 years ago, is really getting tested in real time. And so, Emily, I'd like to start with you. When we're thinking about an overcapacity market, what are cell and gene therapy teams most likely to perhaps maybe misunderstand or not really get right when they begin evaluating their manufacturing options?
I just wanted to thank you for having me. And I'm at ASGCT right now, so it's perfect timing for us to discuss this. But I think that people see the overcapacity and have a false sense of, I have so many choices. And I think one of the first things that sponsors really need to look at is it's still a good technical fit. So just because there's overcapacity doesn't mean that everyone is bringing the same thing to the table. And I think a lot of CDMOs took the last few years to become specialized, whether that's Lenti or AAV or plasma manufacturing. So I think a lot of people don't consider the technical fit, and they'll just jump to they have time, or they're a little bit more affordable, and they'll really pay for that down the road. So understanding if it's a technical fit and the logistics that CDMO brings are important, especially when you're considering modalities that are specialized, like cell therapy or something like that. Maybe where I'd start. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point.
Mm-hmm.
Sugu, I'd like to ask you when it comes to maybe perhaps from the operator side, what changes when companies start treating manufacturing more as a strategic decision rather than just a capacity decision?
Yeah, thank you, Erin, for that question, and thank you for having me over. I would actually just continue from the point that Emily just made, that yes, it needs to be looked at as a strategic or strategy-based decision. And when that happens, the focus shifts from simply securing access to choosing the right fit-for-purpose model. And by fit-for-purpose, I mean, is it fit for the program and the construct that you're trying to advance? So in that case, the decisions start aligning more closely with what exactly is the target product profile, what are the clinical timelines, and what is the long-term commercialization strategy for that construct. And then companies also begin to prioritize on process understanding, the technical capabilities, scalability, ability to continue the data from as the program advances further. All those become important, and that actually reduces rework, minimizes any disruptions in the tech transfers, and it actually helps accelerate the path from clinic to commercialization, which is what you want.
Yeah, good. Okay. And Emily, my question for you, when a cell and gene startup is deciding whether to rent, lease, or build, which is kind of, the topic of our whole discussion here, what should the first filter it uses to kind of narrow the options? Like, what are we thinking? And I know, certainly calling from your time with SK Farmteco and, a very robust background. I think you're the perfect person to answer this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll just stay with the theme. Strategy is the name of the game. So understanding the strategy of your product and your patients and, you know, looking at what the future commercial demand or clinical demand will be would be the first thing that I would look at. So if you're tackling your pipeline is, tackling rare therapies and you're looking at a phase 1 of 10 people, right? A phase 2 of maybe 30 people. And then the overall indication, it may never make sense to build anything, right? It may make a lot more sense to lease because you're going to have downtimes too. You're going to go through phase 1, you're going to be waiting for data or stability, and it may be months, up to a year before you get into phase 2 or phase 3. And you have to think about all of that overhead that you're carrying. And I don't just mean the capital overhead, but the people. So, hiring a large CMC team when your manufacturing strategy is to go into phase 1 and wait for a milestone, go into phase 2. So, partnering with your finance, however that's coming in the PE or VC fund to and understanding what is our strategy and what's our critical milestones. And our patient population is really gonna say, are you going to rent or are you going to lease? You're going to build, buy. Is I think a lot of people don't consider that. And when you don't understand that strategy, then you basically don't understand your cash flow, and every dollar should have a purpose, every single dollar. So, I always tell people managing that is a lot like managing your own household. So having that strategy, I think, is really important in understanding the patients and how many you're going to serve.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think another point that you mentioned too, the human capital component of this is something very important to consider as well. Um, I want to talk a little bit about I&D enabling material. And so before we get into all that, I just want to direct you to our poll question. What is the biggest bottleneck for cell and gene therapy companies as they move toward I&D? And it looks like, if I can check out looks like about, securing fit for purpose manufacturing capacity and building a process that is scalable beyond first in human are tied for first and tied for first. Um, let's consider that as we move into our discussion here about I&D enabling material, and perhaps we can, address that as well, our responses here. I mean, one of the most important pressure points for any cell and gene therapy program is getting high quality I&D enabling material early enough to keep momentum. And so, Sugu, I guess my first question for you is one, what are your thoughts on our poll results? Do you in fact agree? Do you see any? What are your thoughts on how our audience polled today? And then, second to that, what do you see as the biggest difference between manufacturing that is just available and manufacturing that is actually really ready to support I&D enabling material?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. And I do tend to agree with the direction the poll's heading. I think manufacturing needs to be fit for purpose to provide that I&D enabling material. And that distinction that you're talking about, Aaron, is very critical between you just have capacity versus you have a manufacturing capability that can actually get you I&D enabling material. Because when you have that I&D enabling manufacturing capability, it actually gives you the confidence and the capability to advance the program forward versus just being able to generate material. Because generating material is not the end. You do want to actually be able to progress the program forward. So that includes having a stable, characterized process, qualified raw materials, and defined control strategy, as well as having the quality and regulatory capabilities and all those and the operation standards to be able to make the material every time. All these are what distinguishes the I&D enabling manufacturing capability. And especially critical is also the autologous cell therapy is the manufacturing success, because when you're actually doing the development and even the R&D enabling material, you're doing that with healthy donors and when the patients come, that material could be different. So you want to make sure that you have a high manufacturing success rate. And all of that actually is the distinction between just having manufacturing capacity versus having a manufacturer that can actually support IND enabling material. And it also helps you in that case to progress the program forward should you see positive signal. So that distinction is really critical.
Great, thank you. Emily, so for you, if you could, weigh in on your thoughts on the response to our poll question. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And then on top of that, what do you see companies most often run into trouble when they're trying to produce high quality IND enabling material early?
Mhm. I think I do agree. IND enabling material is a bit easier to come across than I would say fit for purpose manufacturing. I think the vetting is a lot longer. So I do agree with that. But I will like to just point out that I don't think folks think about what IND enabling material is. And it's a very hot topic in the market right now. And one of the things they really need to think about is like that needs to be very close, not in the GMP perspective, but very close from a construct, from a design perspective to the functionality of your final product. So that is truly informing some of the most critical decisions for the rest of the program. So biodistribution studies, dose range finding studies, what are you actually going to give to the patients? And I think people jump in and just, go right for tox, but making sure that that is not so far from the final product, right? What are, from a tissue tropism perspective, from a capsid perspective, all of that, it really does need to be very, very close because it's going to inform a lot of the other downstream decisions that you make, including some of the manufacturing decisions, right? So one area that always becomes a bottleneck, and it kind of falls into that fit for purpose, is your analytical strategy. And a lot of times the material will be used for that. So developing assays and validating assays, this is when you can get started on it. And I think that can really hurt innovators later. And additionally, like you are generating material for your CMC data pack at that point. So it does need to be quite close and well thought through, and CMC can become a problem.